Hey everyone, my name is Nathan Bird, founder of Acquisition IQ Network, as well as the Acquisition IQ podcast. And today we're joined with one of our founding members of the Acquisition IQ Network, Andrew Heer. Andrew Heer is an entrepreneur and a private equity professional with 7 years of experience acquiring and operating businesses. He has led 2 successful acquisitions, bringing a hands-on approach to scaling operations, optimizing performance, and driving long-term growth. Andrew combines his strategic insight with operational leadership to create lasting value across his portfolio. So we're excited to have you here today in the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think you'll be able to share a lot of insight for business owners that are, one, looking to acquire a company, trying to identify that target, know exactly how to negotiate term sheets, all of the things that you're going to go through during a transaction. And I believe you'll bring a lot of insight there. But first, let's just get started on your entrepreneurial journey and why are you an entrepreneur?
Yeah. It started back when I was at UVU and was not really quite sure what I wanted to do. Investment banking sounded kind of sexy, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, wearing fancy business suits, making millions of dollars. And I had 2 cousins that went down that pathway. And so I got to see firsthand just the massive time commitment that it required and the imbalance of life that it created for them in their small young families. And I grew up in a business owner family. My father's a blue collar business owner. He started a pool company about 30 years ago. And so I got to experience having my dad around at my basketball games, going to scout camps. And because he was the owner of the business, he could put things on pause and do those things. Can't quite do that in the investment banking world, at least right up front, right? They kind of tell you your first 5 years, you're paying your dues. So I was in a little bit of a limbo, signed up for, I believe it's called Entrepreneur Lecture Series at UVU, and had quite a few amazing entrepreneurs come through that series. A few of them that were noteworthy: Greg Warnock, Andrew Smith, just to name a couple. And they, just hearing them talk, first off, I definitely judged books by their cover back then. And when you see Andrew Smith or you hear Greg Warnock talk for the first time, especially if you don't know them, they're not those big names that you normally hear mentioned, you kind of discount them a little bit. But then you start hearing them talk and you hear how much of a wealth of knowledge and experience that they have. And it lit this fire within my belly that, like, I know that's what I needed to do. And so I was at the end of my college career, so I couldn't really switch pathways for my degree. So finished and then decided to plant my flag in the fertile soil of entrepreneurship.
That's there's a lot of people that do that. They've got this moment of time where they have to ask themselves, hey, do I either get a job or do I get a job and then do I focus on a side gig to make sure that I can make that my full time? But there's always this time where you've got to make a full all in. It's a mentality, right? It's like Kobe. You're a big Kobe fan, right? So he goes all in what he does. And when was that moment? And it sounded like it was right out of college. Yeah. So what was your first endeavor? And then obviously we'll get into the businesses that you've purchased as well as the ways that you've helped other people.
Yeah. So unfortunately, you can't just declare yourself an entrepreneur and start cashing checks, right?
Yeah.
And so as great as that might sound, I took a job at a small marketing firm that did SEO right out of school. And from there, I met a gentleman who introduced me to Greg Warnock's son, Jensen Warnock. And we had some cross-contaminating ideas around the technology, around home management, and just being able to basically classify all the things within your home, from your appliances to your paint color. So basically just a repository for the homeowner so that you don't lose what special paint number you have. And
It's a good idea.
You don't got to keep cans of 15-year-old paint out in your garage, you know? So we had some cross-contaminating ideas on that topic. And so he invited me to join him and do a tech startup, basically. I had zero tech experience, zero. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no experience in venture capital, raising funds. Like, I was a fish out of water, but I was stoked because I knew that family had tremendous success in the venture capital space, especially with tech investing. So I dove all in, feet first, hands first. I don't know. I just cannonballed in. And we worked on that for about 8 months. And I quickly learned, and Jensen was very much of a figure it out type of personality, because you're never going to learn unless you get your hands dirty. Ultimately, it didn't end up materializing into anything. But at that moment, they invited me to manage their family office. And so I started doing that, and then also continuing my entrepreneurial endeavors. Letter boards were a big thing at the time. And we were about ready to have our first baby, Kobe. And I was like, well, let's do some gender-themed baby boards. And so we reached out to the suppliers and got some samples made. I was doing it with my brother. And we started reaching out to some influencers, like, oh, this is going to be big. And then all of a sudden these influencers are like, well, I need some, payment up front.
Money up front.
And I'm just like, well, what's the guarantee that,
you're actually going to help?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And I was broke, dude. I was like straight out of school. My wife's a school teacher, getting ready to have our first kid. So I didn't have a lot of capital at our fingertips. And so I tried a GoFundMe. I tried all the creative, free routes, and that ultimately did not go as planned as well. And so just trying little things here and there like that, learning a lot along the way. And then around 2020, I had been managing the family office for 2.5, 3 years at that point, and just wanted to take, their advice and what they did in their lives and replicate that, obviously. And so I was like, I needed to diversify my income. And so that's when I decided to start looking into acquiring businesses. That was beginning of COVID's when the whole SMB acquisition started to gain some real traction on Twitter, now X. So I did a lot of self-education via that way, following those guys like Nick Huber, and started looking for deals.
As far as let's just hop into that now, into the way that you're looking for deals, the forums that you educate yourself on. Now, obviously, it's 2025, 2020, 21. You're starting to look into this realm of entrepreneurship because it's a little bit different. Your searcher, your fund, your your SMB acquisition strategy, that's a little bit different than just wanting to start your own company. So where did you first begin?
KSL. I think I started just looking on either KSL or Facebook, one of those two platforms. The first deal that I found was a mobile detail business.
Okay.
And all in, it was about $50K. Again, I didn't have a ton of capital at my disposal. I didn't really broadcast that I was doing this to the family office. 2020 hindsight, I probably should have, but I wanted to kind of,
create your own destiny, really.
Yeah, punch my own ticket, prove everyone that I can go out, diligence, raise capital, whatever it needs to be. So called a guy, And he's like, yeah, I got 3 locations, Salt Lake,
Mm-hmm.
Phoenix, and Houston. And I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And he's got all the vehicles, and the diligence process started. There wasn't really a ton that definitely no data room, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I think he sent over like his Stripe account
Yeah,
or something like that. And I was just like, that's it. Like,
that's it.
you don't have like a payroll, Gusto records, anything like that. No, QuickBooks, nothing. No,
Yeah.
I just got this Stripe account. All right, but I know how to build Facebook pages and Facebook marketing, and that's really where the asset is within the Facebook page. And so I'm like, all right, well, I can probably just buy this with straight of my own cash, own 100% of it, and off to the races. I had a friend who was in the mobile detail business. I had a little experience in it. And so the first move we made was, I think I gave him $1,800 as a deposit. And he's like, well, the Houston and Phoenix locations aren't really working right now.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, red flag, you told me there's 3 locations. And he's like, so you're going to have to go down and pick up the vehicle from Phoenix. And I was just like, okay. So me and my wife book a fly down to Phoenix, and he brought it to my brother-in-law's house and parked it, had his employee or whatever park it in front of my brother-in-law's house. We get there. This thing is a 2001, 2002 Ford Econoline, and it's beat up. It's beat. Like the door handle on the driver's side is non-existent. And so I go around to the passenger side. That one doesn't work. So I go to double opening door, open that. That thing is just stuffed with equipment and supplies, like not organized at all. And I'm starting to get like, what
did I do?
Right. What I get myself into at this point? And we have to drive this back to Salt Lake in July from Phoenix. It's like
100 degrees,
120 degrees.
Yeah. It's gonna melt on you.
And Nathan, like you wouldn't have put your worst enemy in this van and asked them to drive this away. We got in it and started driving. In the steering wheel to stay straight.
Yeah.
I was doing this just to stay straight.
Left and right. Yeah.
And I looked at the registration. It hasn't been registered in 6 months. So I call him, I'm like, hey, dude, where's the registration? Where's the insurance? And he's like, oh, well, it hasn't had any. And like I'm selling it, so I don't need it. And I was just like, dude, I'm not gonna drive this back to Salt Lake without any insurance. Hasn't been registered in 6 months, dude. And so we drove it on the freeway for, I don't know, a couple miles. And that's when me and my wife just looked at each other. We were like, no way in hell. No way in hell. So we pull off. We find a Walmart. I go and buy one of those little magnetic hide keys. And I put the key in it, park it in a shady space there in the parking lot. And we Ubered to the airport, and I texted dude. I was like, sorry, this isn't going to work. That's way too big of a liability for me to drive that to Salt Lake. We're out. And he went off. He went off on me as if I just, I was his girlfriend and broke off an engagement or something. It was crazy, dude.
Okay, so let's replay. So you, in essence, the due diligence process here, you think probably should have been a little bit more, probably a little bit more structured, I guess. Obviously, looking back, and of course, you're still in this position where you still want to look to create your own destiny. And I think there's a lot of people out there too, right? I mean, we've had many people on this podcast that maybe they've done multiple deals, right? But then also there are people just like yourself that were just getting started. We wanted to get into this. So there's a lot of emotion involved as well, but also excitement. And then you start getting into all these things like what you just experienced. Okay, so the due diligence process for this one specific deal was maybe were there any financials?
Zero, just
Okay,
his Stripe account.
Okay. Yeah, so a Stripe account that would just say, hey, this is what they're doing, quote unquote, for locations and for, their year's worth of salary or revenue. And then from there, he said that he had multiple locations, but it sounded like it was a little bit of a not as structured of a business as you would have thought.
Yeah.
I would say you made a really good decision as to cut your loss quickly. Now, what about this earnest money?
Yeah,
Or like 1,800,
yeah,
right?
$1,800. I tried to get it back, and he was just like, no, I'm keeping this. Like, there was zero paperwork done, so it was like spit in a handshake type of thing. And it was just my eagerness to just get something done. I overlooked all these things, and as we continue to discuss, like the listeners will find out that I'm one of the most unsophisticated M&A acquirers up to this point, and I am definitely a school of hard knocks, burn my hand on the stove learner. But I just want to be transparent, because I know that there's so many people who want to jump in and do this, but I want to help them avoid those mistakes, and it's worth being picky. It's worth waiting just a little bit longer, saving up a little bit more money so that you can hire some, the right attorneys or CPAs to look at things.
Okay, yeah, let's get into this. So you have now made this acquisition, but then it was not quite an acquisition because you experienced something that was not to your expectations.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Let's just give a shout out to your wife right now on this podcast, just because
Thanks, babe.
walking through this life with you and supporting the decisions. So let's move into maybe acquisition number 2, or how you recuperated, but then how you continued on this path of due diligence and understanding the space of mergers and acquisitions.
So from there, this was about beginning of July 2021. And so I was like, well, I think I'll start leveraging the broker platforms to see, because obviously if it's on a broker, it's probably more legitimate business. Again, not true. If it's on a brokerage site, doesn't mean it's necessarily a mature or appropriate business to acquire. So reached out to a broker. We started having some conversations. Kind of told him like the funds that I was working with, my background in the pool service industry, private equity. He actually had a pool company on his list, and fortunately I knew who that was, and I was like, I'm not gonna touch that with a 10-foot pole. And then he's like, well, there's this commercial cleaning business up in Park City. And I had followed a couple commercial cleaning guys on Twitter and followed their stories and just kind of just observed their experiences. And I was looking for something that would provide us more of a passive income. Excuse me. And cleaning's not rocket science, right? And so I decided to engage with that seller, and the due diligence process was a little bit better. Like, he actually had some financials, but they were on an Excel spreadsheet. Wasn't like from Xero or any of those accounting softwares. It was just on. They could have been made up for all I know, right? Because it's an Excel spreadsheet. You can put in whatever number you want. Had a couple meetings with the seller. He was an investment banker whose career was primarily in Europe. So that kind of gave me some trust that and he came off as an honest person. he bought the business when it was much smaller for his kids to teach them about business. And so again, I'm like, all right, that's a good reason to buy a business, and he's teaching his kids good principles. So there's probably a good foundation in this business. And after looking at the numbers, I'm like, all right, we can make this work. Let's do it. So we got an SBA loan.
I was going to ask what type of funding. Obviously, you got the SBA loan, but what type of funding is there for a business acquisition?
Sure.
And how can somebody go down that route?
Yeah. There's the private equity route where you can go raise money from family offices, from funds that focus on operational businesses. That's kind of more of like what you hear, the searcher route. You can obviously just pay cash for something if you have those funds available. There's conventional lending you can get, but SBA lending is probably the easier route to get.
What were some of the requirements needed for an SBA loan?
Oh, I'd rather get a mortgage. It was, it wasn't difficult. It was just monotonous, tons of paperwork. They're digging through all your financials. So, you're printing off all the statements, your mortgage statement, your income for, don't quote me on that. I think it's like 2 years.
2 or 3 years.
Something like that. You're putting together a business plan and a lot of federal paperwork.
Okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. For those out there that are working towards that right now, and they're looking at their target, and they're now expecting what you just said, right, to go through this process. So now you are going through the due diligence. This seems like it's a little bit better than the previous one.
Yeah.
Somebody a little bit more sophisticated than the last. That's okay. You got to live and learn, and I think that's what it's all about. Never giving up and continue to learn throughout the process. So what are some things that you've learned throughout this process of identifying this target, making the acquisition, and then starting to run the actual business? Because now you have acquired this business.
Right. So that was the kind of a scary thing when you close on a business and then the next day you're like, I'm not responsible for these human beings that are doing this work. It was a big paradigm shift.
Yeah, it was the excitement of purchasing a business, and then all of a sudden you close.
It's tangible, it's real. And so the biggest client we had was Vail Ski Resorts, and we closed on this December 2021. So ski season had just kicked off, right?
Busy,
yeah. And so we go up there, and he was pretty interested in a very quick transition. We didn't have very many clients, and this is something we can talk about too. Was one of the 2020 hindsight mistakes. Vail represented 90%
of the company's revenue.
Of the revenue, right? And so we only had, I think at the time, 4 or 5 smaller accounts. So, primarily Vail was the focal point of this business and where all the employees were primarily. And so it was just, getting to know them, gaining their trust. They were pretty shocked because they had no idea that there was a sale in progress. And that's when my eyes started to open. Like, this isn't going to be easy. Because, and I'm not speaking ill towards the seller in any way, shape, or form, but it was a hobby business for him and his kids when it was started out, right? So again, no systems, no processes, no accountability. These employees were, how do I say this in a nice way? They abuse substances from just looking at them, and lots of excuses as to like why they miss work, why they're late, they go missing. And I was just like, oh man, what did I get myself into? Even though this was a little bit more of a quote unquote mature business, it still was run on the back of a napkin. Like, I'm like, what do you do for payroll? Oh, they text me their hours at the end of the week.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, how do you hold them account? Like, how do you know that that's real?
Yeah.
So I could tell that it was to the point, and his business had been for sale for 2 years. He tried to sell it for 2 years. He didn't care about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that was a little disheartening when I came to that realization, like, crap.
You came to the realization that some of these employees weren't as structured as you had expected, with more of a sophisticated purchase, because that's what happened. And then you started to see that there were some things that weren't going as you planned, right? So for example, the hours, like you just stated, the hours that people were texting in to the previous boss wasn't as organized. So when you first made this acquisition, was it your main focus to identify the systems? And then also, what word of advice would you give to those that are making an acquisition? And then is there a specific time frame that you would set aside for the uncovering of information to create more systems within, or what would you suggest there?
So just to start with that last question there.
Mm-hmm.
Employees struggle with change, and even the change of regime and the ownership, that shakes things up a lot for them. Because I mean, I've had new bosses come in and everyone's on edge, like, oh crap, are they going to be, rude? Are they going to be mean? Are they going to be chill? So everyone's on edge. And then if you come in and start implementing all these, new systems, processes, accountability metrics, all that, they struggle. And so my suggestion is give it at least 90 days to just be in there, observe. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if there's some detrimental to the business practices happening, that's leaving you open for liability or whatever it may, button those up. But one of the first things I did is I went and put fingerprint scanners in all the cleaning closets to clock in and clock out. And oh my gosh.
They don't like that.
No, they did not. They still found ways to manipulate it, right? But it was just the fact that they can't they were supposed to be there at 7 a.m. And I live about an hour and 10 minutes away from Park City. So it's not like a quick jaunt for me to go up there, right? And so they knew that even with the previous owner, they could kind of mosey in at 8 to 8:30, but they're still saying that they were there by 7
or 7. Okay,
yeah. Like those are the little things that like upset them. And then obviously my relationship with Vail, like I want to make sure we do a good job. And so I'm doing a lot more quality control checks, and they're now, frustrated because they can't just hang out and go meet for lunch and take a 2-hour lunch, all that kind of stuff. Sorry, what was the first part of that question?
No, that was good, because basically you started implementing systems, which was really important for the business. So then you could start to really streamline some of the, efficiencies within the organization. Because I think that's what I've seen and noticed from many entrepreneurs, as well as people like yourself that are purchasing businesses. It's the finances that always need to be cleaned up. It's then the systems of scale that need to be implemented, and then the efficiencies that need to be taken into consideration, because the previous owner, they've got this 2 or 3 years where they're starting to make their transition out because they don't necessarily care too much about the business, or because it's almost like you want to finish strong. I think that some of you out there that have businesses, you want to finish strong with creating the most value for your business upon exit.
Yeah.
And, for you as the acquirer, of course, you want the best, most organized business so that you can step in. You know what I mean? Obviously, if it's going to be a little bit more on the upfront capital, that's fine if all of these things are in place, right? Because true. So like the amount of time and due diligence that you're having to put in, you would almost rather just pay more money for everything because that'll just expedite the process.
Correct.
So, well, this is good. I mean, you've currently got to a position of now owner of a company. Now you're starting to see some things. It may be a little bit difficult, right? Because with anything, it's not always going to be perfect, like you say, and like we know in life. And you're going to go through bumps. So share with us a little bit of the things that you've experienced through that process, and then also words of advice for those out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, I went from, and throughout this whole process, I'm still full-time managing the family office.
Yeah.
And so I go from interacting with a handful of people a day at the family office to now I'm responsible for a team of, I think we had 20 when I first started.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not problem solving type people.
Yeah.
So my phone is blowing up all the time, constantly, with the smallest minute problems and issues.
Like, where's the broom?
Yeah.
Or something.
Stuff like that. And so that was a really big adjustment and a bump to go from I'm just taking care of myself, I'm working with very high-level professional people, to I'm dealing with this different group of people, and learning how to communicate effectively with them and get on their level, because I can't come in and use the same vernacular that I do in the family office and private equity that you would with a commercial cleaning business and those employees. So that was a hurdle. Pricing. Oh my goodness. This guy hadn't updated his pricing in 5 years. And by that point, I mean, you remember when we went through those big price swings through COVID, right? Excuse me. And so not only had he not adjusted for those inflationary costs with COVID, it had been 5 years. And as a business owner, you should be constantly evaluating your cost basis to make sure that you're getting your margin. And so that was kind of like a big question mark. I was like, oh man, this margin isn't super fantastic. When I asked the guy about pricing, he was like, well, this is kind of what I do. I'm like, well, there's no like industry standard. He's like, I'm sure there's, but this is what we agreed to. So I had to go into all those clients and right off the bat,
new owner, new pricing.
Yeah, which is like so cliche, right? Like, I don't want to be that guy, but like I have to, right? I got a SBA payment to pay. I got this huge payroll to pay. I want to make some money too.
Yes.
And so that was a little bit of a uncomfortable process. Pushed it through with the smaller accounts. Okay. I got in a pickle with Vail because he misrepresented how he was invoicing them. And so we got about 3 months down the road, and Vail came at me and was like, hey, we're 55% over budget. What is going on? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just invoicing you how the last guy did. And like, no, we're over big. And so I'm like, crap, let's figure this out. So I went in and he had, I won't get into the details, but just, they were like, we're 25K and some change over. You need to pay that back. And I'm just like, that's gone. Like, I've paid the labor. Like, there's no margin there, hardly any. I'm making my SBA payment. That's about it. And they, because they're the big 800-pound corporate gorilla in the room, kind of stuck it to me, and I need them. Right?
Yeah, 90%.
And I gotta pay a loan. So I negotiated it down to 20. I was like, hey, there's some fault on your side. You know, your accounting department did not catch this for almost 3 months. So we negotiated it down to 20. And I was like, can we break it up over a 10-week period? Because I invoice them on a weekly basis. So that way I didn't take this huge hit. So I just carved off, $2,000 a
Yeah.
week from their invoice to crawl out of that hole. And that was the first of like 3 really bad budgeting, invoicing issues that I had to deal with. So kind of it was like my big negotiating foray right
Yes.
there.
Interesting. So, well, you've gone through quite a bit here. So you've got you went through the detail company, and then you went through the acquisition of this cleaning company, and then, understanding how to communicate. I think that's one of those big things that we can learn from this, podcast is, one, understanding the systems, understanding the finances before you get into a deal, understanding how to do your due diligence process in a very, very organized and detailed, analytical way. And then also, it sounded like for you, understanding the emotions that play into the desire to want to acquire. I think that is extremely important before you go all the way through this process, because then you got yourself in a position where you then realize, of course, it's going to be work, but maybe it wasn't the right time, or maybe it wasn't, exactly the business, for you at that moment in time.
Yeah.
And I think that's something we can all learn, as far as when we get into something, that we're excited, the endeavor to get into, but also looking at it, and then having some wise advisors. Had there been anyone that you placed around yourself? Obviously, you're at a family office, so were you able to bounce some of these ideas off of mentors or advisors that you have?
No, and
Okay.
that was a big mistake on my part.
Yeah.
Because obviously I had people who were deal savants,
Mm-hmm.
right? And probably would have caught things because, like you said, it's an emotional thing. It's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Doing deals is euphoric. It's kind of like a drug. Like once you do one, you're like, oh, when's the next one gonna hit?
Yes.
And so you kind of you have some blinders on,
Yeah.
and you tend to overlook some things, and you need those trusted people who
Yes.
are going to be the devil's advocate for you. And I did not do that.
Yeah. Well, that's good, because I think that, again, for you out there that are listening to this podcast or watching it, just make sure that you don't just place those emotions above the mentors and advisors that have been there and done that. In every circumstance is different. And I know you, for your example, you were wanting to pave your own path, and it was like, no, I don't need anybody else, because I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Like, that is a wonderful, wonderful attitude to have, and it's going to serve you multiple times over and over again in the future as well. But it's good that you're able to learn, through reflection, to help you in the future. So what are you working on now? What are you excited about stepping into at this moment? And how can our community support you as well?
Yeah. Do you want to get into the hairy stuff?
Well, it's, as far as what you want to share,
Sure.
we'd like to, is make sure that it's more educational in nature, and then how people can really understand some of that.
Right. So we went through, I guess you could say, almost a third acquisition, June 2023, and again, made some critical errors in that move. Acquired an adjacent business in the cleaning space. We seller financed that, and it went okay for a while. Hired some help, and then thought that I could kind of take my eye off the ball and refocus on the family office. And so, fast forward till now, it didn't work out the way that I had planned. Probably should have kept my thumb on things a little bit more. So, currently we're navigating a bankruptcy. That was a tremendous, blow to the ego. Big bump in the road.
Well, let's talk real quick before we hop off. Let's talk about the bumps in the road that you're talking about. And because, it doesn't happen overnight that you're in a position where you have to consider bankruptcy. But I think as entrepreneurs, again, you go through all sorts of things. Even the wealthiest have experienced, financial, I guess you'd say, um, so financial opportunities. Let's just put it that, because it really is, honestly, and it's all in how you look at it. But why do you feel it got to that position, and what are some of the things now looking back at it that you would have changed?
Accountability, and with the people that you bring on board, and making sure that you have the right butts in the right seats. And so I had made some hires based off of some friendships.
Okay.
And because it was a friendship based hire, I had some additional trust that I wouldn't normally in just a cold hire. And I did not keep him as accountable as I should have been. And great guy. I don't harbor any ill will towards him. He just wasn't the person for the position to GM the entire company. And so, obviously things can get off track pretty quick if you don't have somebody who's looking at the numbers and all they're telling you is, yep, things are great. Things are great.
Yeah, according to what, and according to what KPIs that we both have agreed upon. Right. And then also, I think that you're on track there, and it's good that you now are reflecting and then also able to share this with others.
Yeah.
I think that because we don't want it all to be gravy, right? Like you were saying, as far as just, I'm an acquisition entrepreneur and I'm going to be buying these businesses. And then, and then all of a sudden you forget to implement things, or you forget to take it serious, because you're only looking for that passive income. Yep. Whereas actually running a business that is successful and that can grow requires significant, sacrifice, but effort. Also wisdom and effort and things like that.
So I would, circling back to some of the things that I would do differently is, for those that are listening, there's probably a price hurdle for an acquisition, depending on what you're looking for. If you are tired of working for the man, and let's say you work for a carpet cleaning company, you're like, I've been doing this for 5 years, I can do it on my own. I just want to own my own business. I still want to do the work, maybe have an employee or two. Those lower priced companies, probably a good fit, because you are going to be hands-on. You are going to be owning those relationships. But on my side of the table, where I was looking for passive income,
yes,
big mistake, because I bought 2 jobs. On top of my 3rd full-time job, right? And so taking a business that was still premature, didn't have the cash flows to pay someone that was qualified to run the business, hindered me, and I tried to force that issue.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's how we got to that point. It was a dark point, and I want to be as transparent as possible with those that are listening and watching.
One thing I was gonna actually add to what you said, and also I've seen in other leaders, but and I've experienced this too as we've continued to grow, the conferences and communicate ways that a leader has to. It's always the leader's fault. Yeah. It always is.
100%.
And whether we admit it or not, and sometimes it's difficult to admit that, and sometimes it really is. Sometimes others have mistakes that they make, but it's always our responsibility as to how we articulate what is needed. For you, for example, and also for me, I've had to articulate to, for example, we run the big conference, Acquicon conference, right? And if I don't articulate the way that I want the videography to look, or the production of the event experience to feel, or everything to the very minute detail, and how I give them the blueprint as to what the end product will look like, and then also hire or place those people in those roles that I've been so defined, then it's like my responsibility for those in that position, because they won't know. And then all of a sudden you get to the very end, you're like, oh man, it didn't look, or they didn't do what I was hoping they would do. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, how did I lead them? What did I tell them? How did I structure this?
Well, because sometimes we project ourselves and just expect others to do and act the way we are.
Yep.
And that's not true.
Yeah.
So that was also a fatal error. But I just want to let everyone know, I know we're wrapping up here, that if it's a real possibility that you might experience a bankruptcy, it's not the end of the world. It's just a mere chapter in your book.
Yeah.
And I am putting myself out there and available for people to talk to, because the second you start talking to other people, you're like, okay, other people have done this. They're coming through it on the other side. They're going to be fine, right?
Yeah.
It can be a dark place. And so please don't hesitate to please reach out to myself, anybody, and happy to help navigate someone through that.
Yeah,
and
that's really valuable.
Help where I can.
Well, how can we help you though right now as a part of this community, the
Sure.
Acquisition IQ podcast?
Well, first off, I'm stoked to be a founding member of Acquisition IQ, and help that grow. But I just want to be a value creator. That's what I'm really focused on right now. And so if any of those out there that are running a business and struggling with any aspect of it, really, I've been through it all.
Probably systems, financial, due diligence.
Raising capital for it. Like, I just want to come in and help people so I can, hopefully they avoid those pitfalls that I fell into.
Well, let's help this gentleman out, but also let's congratulate him on the scars that you take during battle in the field of entrepreneurship. I think that's something that we need to acknowledge more, is the failures that we've gone through and how those failures will lead to our eventual success. And but thank you guys for watching today's podcast and also listening in. Again, if you want to learn more about the Acquisition IQ Network, just simply go over to acquisitioniq.co. We are growing the national network, and we also have a national tour that we have scheduled all throughout the summer of 2025. And it's coming to a city near you. We've got 15 different cities that we've already had scheduled, so we're excited about that. You guys are invited to join in on our different events. We should have about 40 to 60, maybe 40 to 100 people per event, and we want to invite you to come and be a part. Secondly, we have the big conference coming in September on the 3rd, 2025 here in Salt Lake City. And again, we're happy to have you be a part of the group and share your knowledge and experience, insight, and wisdom. So thank you so much for watching, guys. We can't wait to tune in again. And make sure to comment below, as well as share this with somebody who is in the acquisition space. We look forward to making more of these for you soon.
Remember, have fun, make money, be kind.